In lesson 24, we have left the router in a very good state of security. There's one more thing though that could be done to make it even more secure, and that has to do with your wireless tables. We come over here and we look up our wireless interfaces, and you notice I have added WLAN 2. The way I did that was I clicked on plus, clicked on virtual, and I added, just put in the name, left everything else default. I've already done that here, so here's what my input looks like. It's a virtual WLAN 2. We also have to be concerned with this other interface WLAN 2 tab, which is labeled wireless. Under here, we leave it AP bridge, just like the other WLAN 1. We assign an SSID name, and you define what the master is for this thing, and we're saying it's WLAN 1 because that's all that existed when I created this virtual WLAN. So that's the master that this one is going to follow. Security profile, we're going to identify that as guest. We don't want to use a default. We're trying to hide the default. So we use guest. The rest of these, we're going to leave them alone as they are. So we apply that and say OK. Once you create this virtual LAN, then you have to go back to your security profiles. Make sure you have a guest security profile. We're going to use dynamic keys WPA2, and we're going to have a pre-shared key that's different. That key is different than the default key for the WLAN 1. This way you don't have to give out your pass keys, or your passwords, I should say. You don't have to give out your password to your guests. They can log in with a different password. This way you're not exposing your password for your Wi-Fi to any guests that happen to log in. So this is an added security feature. The problem is it still doesn't work. We've added the guest security profile, and we have the interface established. The next thing we have to do is go up here under bridge. We have to add WLAN 2 to the port list for the bridges. So that's the bridges. This bridge has our Wi-Fi, this bridge doesn't. So when I go to our ports list, I just added this one right here. When I added it, I simply said that it's WLAN 2. It's connected to bridge 1 Wi-Fi. And now I can get IP addresses out of the bridge 1 Wi-Fi bridge. So I probably should comment that. Virtual WLAN 2 to protect passphrase for WLAN 1. And that's the purpose of this entry right here. So now your virtual WLAN 2 will actually work as it's supposed to. And it will work the same as your WLAN 1, which is obeying all of the rules established for Wi-Fi. I mean the bridge 1-Wi-Fi bridge. Since it's now a part of it, it uses those firewall rules to go and get the internet. So that concludes this little short topic about how to protect your Wi-Fi password for your default WLAN 1. Don't give it out to your guests. Make them sign on to this other virtual WLAN 2. This is in fact another example of MikroTik grouping. Here we're grouping the WLANs so that they all use the same bridge. So I just want to point out one more form of grouping. So at this point you should have a very secure router, and you should understand advanced firewall rules. So basically the way this virtual Wi-Fi LAN works is that it uses the hardware right here. It uses this hardware of your Wi-Fi device when you say it's virtual. But you also have to allow it to get IP addresses someplace. So the IP addresses can come from here, or they can come from down here in this group. So you have a choice by choosing which bridge you select to use with this virtual Wi-Fi interface. So that's the big picture. Hardware is what's virtualized. You still have to select an IP address source. Now this example here we use is not very fruitful. In other words, simple name for the guest circuit. You have a complicated name for your other home Wi-Fi circuit. And you don't have to give this complicated name to the guest. But this doesn't solve anything in our particular system here because they're both treated the same. So the only way it solves anything is if you disable this guest Wi-Fi connection when you don't expect to have guests, and you only turn it on when you have guests that want to connect to your Wi-Fi. So this way you can have a simple Wi-Fi connection for the people that are your guests, and you'll have a complicated Wi-Fi connection to help keep neighbors out when your guest circuit is disabled. So that's the advantage of this process. You can also come over here and you can create a third one. You can create a third WLAN. And this third WLAN has capabilities of this network down here. In other words, you assign it to bridge and not assign the third one to bridge 1 Wi-Fi. Instead, you assign the third one to bridge. That will give you all the privileges that the bridge has. And this would allow Wi-Fi access to configure your router if you ever have a need for that. As long as you keep this virtual bridge disabled, then no one can use it. But if you do enable it, then as long as they have your key, remember the security key, it comes through the proper username, which in this case is add user, with an SSH security key from the Wi-Fi through the WLAN number 3, then they could in fact configure your computer. And you may want that in some circumstance. So once again, you can just disable the WLANs that you don't want to be out there when you're in service mode of operation. Okay, so how exactly do we disable these virtual WLANs? And the answer is it's just simply, if you're using Winbox, you're using WebFig, you simply click on under the wire tables, click on it and disable it. Now, you can also use a terminal if you don't want to bother bringing up one of these other applications to look at it. We just simply use a terminal, go down here and go to the folders interface wireless, and then we can simply type in enable WLAN 2. Notice right now it's disabled. It's disabled. So we come down here, we type this in. So it's that simple to enable disable through the syntax if you want to use a terminal. So hopefully this gives you some ideas, some suggestions how to use this virtual LAN in the future.